So now we're at lesson 8. Lesson 8 is dealing with circles. You've already seen one type of circle today, but you didn't really quite understand it. You thought of it as a line. Well, we only looked at one part of the line. Pause. So we have something like this, where we have our center 0, 0 here, and we have a radius going out from the center to the edge. So its length is r, and the point that's on the line is x and y. The equation for something like that is given by x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. And it looks very similar to a thing called Pythagoras theorem. Okay, so that is what we have for a circle centered at 0, 0. So now, what would happen if we had a circle at center H and K? So what that looks like is something like this. So we have a circle, we have our graph here, we have a point in the center, call it HK, and our circle is around it like that. Okay, the radius goes out to the edge, and we still have our R value, and we have our point XY that's on our graph. The equation for that is not this thing here. It's very similar though. You have x minus h squared plus y minus h squared is equal to the radius squared. So the r squared is what the radius is. And the h and the k stand for the point at which it's centered at the point C. Okay? Let's go on to our concepts for the day. So now, let's take a look at this problem. Okay, find the center of the circle. That's defined by x minus 8 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 49. So when you define that, let's go and do the solution. Let's find the center and the radius. The center is opposite to what you see inside this bracket here. Okay, so the center is going to be the point 8, -2. The radius is equal to the square root of 49, which is equal to 7. Okay? So now let's work on this next problem that I have here. Okay, so now let's imagine that we want to find the equation of a circle with center at 5, -4, and radius 2. So let me just zoom in a little bit. All right, so originally when we had our two circles, there was one that was defined by this one here, where we were looking at our radius of a circle starting at 0, 0. Then we also had this equation where we had our circle centered at HK, where we use the opposite of H and K. Oh boy, make sure that this says K here, guys. Make sure that that says K. Okay? And with a radius of 2. So here is the solution. The solution for this one is we take the opposite of these two and put it inside each of our brackets. So for the x, we'll have x plus 5 squared, plus the y will be y minus 4 squared. And then, as an aside, we take r and we're going to square it. Now, r is the square root of 2, and we're going to square it, and we end up with 2. So the final answer is going to be 2. So remember that r squared is what's at the end of the equation, and this is our final solution for our circle. Okay, for this problem, you have to find the equation of the circle with center 4, 3, and passes through the point P of 1, 4. So you start by just using this. What we know is that our distance to P and C, our distance from P to C is equal to R. So here's what we're doing. We're just going to take the square root of, well, 4 minus 1 squared plus 3 minus 4 squared is equal to R. So now that I've got that, I can simplify my square root. So we end up with 9 plus 1 because 4 minus 1 is 3, square it, 9. 3 minus 4 is negative 1 squared, it's 1. Add it. So we end up with r is equal to the square root of 10. So now that means, so the equation is going to be the following. I'm going to put it in blue. X minus 4 squared plus y minus 3 squared. And when we square a square root, we drop the square root. So we end up with 10. And there is our answer. So now we have a peculiar problem here. This problem requires you to do completing the square. This will probably be one of the hardest problems that you'll face in this lesson, but you know, such is life. Okay, so here we go. When we're solving this problem, we need to put all our pure numbers to the right side of the equation. So this is the equation: 3x squared plus 3y minus 18 plus 6y plus 2 equals 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 2 and move it over here. So now you're left with the following: 3x squared, and then let me just go back here a little bit. Let's write it all in blue. 3x squared. Now I'm going to put all my x's together. So I'm going to get minus 18x, and then we have plus 3y left over, plus 6y is equal to negative 2. So now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to group these things. Everything that is an x and a y. This should be 3y squared here. So now, in order to complete the square, we're going to have to factor out something, the biggest thing that's in each of those brackets. So now let's give ourselves some space so that we can save some time and effort. And what we're going to do is we're going to start over to the left here. We're going to start by pulling out a 3 from the first bracket. So we got 3 bracketed with, well, x squared minus 6x. Now you're going to leave a space in your bracket so that we could figure out what we're going to add and subtract to complete the square. Then we're going to have a plus. We're going to pull out a 3 from the second bracket. Please make sure that you correct this bracket above here. I made a mistake and did not put y squared here where it should be. All right. So then we have 3, and then we're left with, in our bracket, the following. We've got y squared plus 2y, and then leave a space because we're going to add and subtract some number in there and then pull it out, which is equal to negative 2. So now that we've got that pulled off, so I'm going to write this in red. So in order to get the perfect square for 6, we have to take negative 6, divide it by 2, and square it. And you end up with 9. So we're going to have to add 9 and subtract 9 from the first bracket. For the second bracket, we're going to have to take 2 divided by 2, square it, and you're going to get 1. So we're going to have to add 1 and subtract 1 from this bracket. So now that we've done that, what this allows us to do is it allows us to take this negative 9 from this bracket, and we're going to move it out. We're also going to do the same for this negative 1 and move it out. Now, when we move it out, we need to times whatever that 9 is by the number sitting in front of our bracket. So in this case, we're going to times by 3, and this one we're going to times it by 3 again. Okay, so now we end up with 3 bracketed with x squared minus 6x, and then plus 9, and then negative 9 times 3 is going to be negative 27. And we've just pulled that out. So we got minus 27 plus 3 times the quantity y squared plus 2y plus 1. And since we pulled out the minus 1, we got to multiply by 3. So we've got minus 3 outside our bracket, which equals minus 2. So now let's simplify the brackets. So now we're left with 3 x squared minus 6x plus 9. Oh, and that actually turns into the following. Because we've completed the square, this is going to be just x minus 3 squared minus 27 plus 3 times y plus 1 squared minus 3 equals negative 2. Now that we've got that, the only thing that we have to worry about now is this bracket here, this number here, and this number here. We're going to move these over to this side of our equation, the right side of our equation, and we're left with, on the left side, 3x minus 3 squared plus 3y plus 1 squared is equal to 28, because we've got minus 2 plus 27 plus 3 gives us 28. And the final thing to do is to divide, get rid of the numbers that are sitting in front of the bracket. So we're going to divide everything by 3. So we are left with the following. So the center of the circle is basically 3, 1. And if I asked you for the radius, you can leave it as this. And the radius is just leave it as a square root of 28 over 3. Okay. And we're done. And we're done that problem. So the last concept we're going to look at is a thing called semicircles. No big deal. We'll do semicircles and a solution. When you hear the concept of a semicircle, what we're talking is a half circle. Okay? We're either talking about the top half, the bottom half, the left half, or the right half. You only need to be able to do this for the equation x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. Okay? So now let's go and work on the upper and lower halves of a circle. All right, so if we're going to do that, we're going to have to start with y squared is equal to, take our x and bring it over to the right side. So we got r squared minus x squared, right? So now, once we've got that, we can take the square root of this. Now, when we take the square root of something that is in algebra, we have to take the plus or minus the square root. So we end up with r squared minus x squared. So it's plus or minus that. So now this problem breaks up into two parts. either y is equal to plus, well, not plus, let's get rid of the plus. Just put the square root of r squared minus x squared, or this graph looks like y is equal to negative the square root of x squared plus y squared. Okay? Now, what happens is this gives us two different halves of the graph. Because it's y, it gives us either the top half of the circle centered at 0, 0, or it gives us, this one here gives us the bottom half of the circle. Okay? Now let's go and take a look at something that deals with the left and right of our circle. So just give me a moment here. I'm having a little issue with my software. So now let's do the right and left side of the circle. If we go through the same motions as before, but this time we're going to do it for x, we're going to have, so we end up having almost identical calculations for our y's, where we have y is this, and y is negative the square root of that, and then x is going to be the square root of r squared minus y, squared, and this, the negative of the square root sign. So when we have the positive square root, all that gives us is the right half of the circle. If I'm looking at the negative side of the square root of this, that means we're going to get the right half of the circle. So let's write this down. So we have the upper, we have the lower half, the right half, and the left half of the circle, depending on which equation that we're looking for. Okay? So take a moment and copy that down. And then on the bottom half of your page, we're going to do this last problem here. Okay? And we're going to look for either the left half of the circle or the right half, or the top half of the circle or the bottom half of the circle. Okay? And by doing what we just did there, we kind of understand how we're going to solve for our problems, which means that we can extend it to a circle centered at HK. So we'll do that as the next problem. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to shrink it, and then we're going to do the problem right underneath so we can quickly reference how to do this next problem. Okay, so for our semicircle, we have the left half, right half, all that business. Okay? Now, here is the problem that we're going to be working on. All right, here's our last example of the day. Find an equation for the left half of the circle. Okay? So for the left half of the circle, we're looking for something that looks like this, right? And what we did was we took x squared. So the x squared term in here is x minus 5 squared. And we moved our equation, we moved everything to the right side, and then we did the plus or minus. So let's do that in order to solve this problem here, where we have x minus 5 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 9. So we're going to solve for the x minus 5 squared, and then we're going to square root, move everything over to one side, and then, boom, get our answer. Let's try this. Okay, here we go. So now we'll start by taking x minus 5 squared, and we're going to move this part here, the y minus 1 squared, to the other side. So we have 9 minus y minus 1 squared. Now, to get rid of the squared on the left side of the equation, we just write x minus 5 and drop the brackets is equal to, notice I'm going to put this in red so you can remember, plus or minus the square root of 9 minus y minus 1 squared. Now that I have that, I can isolate x just like I did right here. I can get x by itself by taking the minus 5 and bringing it over in front of this, okay, in front of the plus or minus. So now we're going to have x is equal to 5, plus or minus the square root of 9 minus y minus 1 squared. What does that mean? So we want, from our original part, we wanted the left half of the circle, and that only happens when we use the negative half of the square root sign. So let's use that. Oops. So now, to get the left half, all we're going to do is just use the minus sign of our square root sign. So the left half is x is equal to 5 minus the square root of 9 minus y minus 1 squared. And we're done. Okay, so your practice is going to be page 31, 5 through 13 odd, and then question number 19, 21, 22, which doesn't have a solution, and 29. It's very similar to what the last example was. Good luck.